You knew he didn't mean for everyone to see it. The slam was meant to be private, one final, brutal punctuation between him and me, but the door wasn't soundproof, and the children had stopped singing mid-verse. The cake, still lit behind me, flickered from the blowback of air like it had gasped. He didn't say my name. That mattered. He didn't call me Ma or even Gran. He just said, loud enough for every fork in the backyard to pause midair, "You're not family anymore." And just like that, the rot that had been growing beneath us for years ripped through the veneer. I didn't argue. My knees ached from the walk, my left wrist was still sore from the fall last week, and I'd spent hours choosing the wrapping paper on the doll for his daughter. But I didn't raise my voice. I looked at him with everything I'd seen and survived and carried, and I said, "Remember this day. This is when you buried not just your mother, but your own future." They thought I was exaggerating. That's always been their mistake, thinking age makes you sentimental, that I'd just waddle off into some crocheted grief. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg to stay. I turned. I felt the heat of 33 candles across my shoulder blades. And I walked. The signal came through later that night. The first one. A flicker in the system I'd spent 12 years building in secret, because foresight is a form of love, and betrayal never leaves empty-handed. I didn't check it right away. I made tea. I unwrapped a fresh bar of lavender soap. I opened the window to let the night air in. Then I sat down, and I watched. You knew what kind of boy he was. The kind who confuses inheritance with immunity. The kind who forgets who gave him his name, and how close I came to changing it before his second birthday. My daughter knew it, too, long before the end. It's why she called me 3 times that week, barely able to speak. It's why her last message wasn't a goodbye, it was a whisper, "It's in the box." They thought they could do what they always do. Cut me out, cash it in, clean the record. But the ink wasn't dry on the death certificate before they tried to take what was never theirs. And he made it public, on her granddaughter's birthday, in front of a dozen relatives, with the cake still singing. That's how I knew he was panicking. That's how I knew what was coming would break him. He slammed the door in my face and sealed his own. That door was never between us, it was behind him, hiding everything he didn't want to face. And by the time he realized what he'd really locked out, I was already 2 steps ahead. The house had changed. The air didn't hold the same weight anymore. I walked slowly back to the car, not because I was weak, but because I was counting. The guests pretended not to see. One of the cousins glanced my way, young Jody, maybe 16, already wise, but she looked down just as fast. They always look down when the tide turns. The doll I'd brought fell from its wrapping somewhere near the trash bin. No one picked it up. The ribbon fluttered like a dying breath. I didn't need to be told not to come back. And he thought it ended there. But I left him with those words. This is when you buried not just your mother, but your own future. Not a curse. A promise. And a truth he'd never stop running from. Because the cake would be eaten. The guests would leave. The door would creak open again, eventually. But the silence between that slam and the next morning? That was mine. That was where the reckoning began. The call came at 6:17 a.m., while the birds outside hadn't yet broken into song and the tea kettle hadn't started its slow, lonely hiss. His voice cracked through the line like it had aged overnight, brittle with a fear he hadn't tasted before. "She's not, they didn't come. The hospice, she's still here. I don't know what to do." You knew it wasn't grief. Grief doesn't sound like that. Grief groans or sputters or howls, but it doesn't stammer like a child caught in a lie. It wasn't my daughter he was panicking over. It was the logistics. The mess. The lack of a plan once the woman who held all the plans slipped out without telling him where she'd hidden the fuse. I didn't answer him right away. I let the silence stretch. You learn to use silence like a knife. His breathing quickened, his mouth made that small dry sound of a man trying to reclaim control. "Ma? Ma, are you there?" She's gone. She's cold." I thought they'd come. He had no idea that the hospice had already called me. Twice. I was listed first on the paperwork, no matter how many times he tried to update the records. I'd told them to wait. To hold. That someone would come, but not yet. There was something she'd left unfinished. The signal came through again at 4:43 that morning. That was how I knew she'd gone. A light pulsed through the encrypted feed from the camera behind the grandfather clock, the same one I'd installed after his second accidental house fire. She'd never asked about it. She knew I watched. It was our unspoken pact. She knew if it came to it, I'd be the one to do what needed doing. He wasn't alone in the room when she passed. The girl was there. The one he never claimed. The one he thought we didn't know about. She sat by the bed, held my daughter's hand, and whispered a name I hadn't heard in 35 years, my husband's, spoken like a prayer. My daughter smiled once, then stilled. The girl kissed her forehead, smoothed her hair, and left before dawn. He never mentioned her. You see, they thought I didn't know about the affair, or the second phone, or the side business bleeding cash into untraceable corners. But I knew. I knew the way he was born to break things that loved him. And I knew that my daughter had died with her eyes wide open. I told him I'd take care of it. Of her. Not him. Leave the house, I said, and he obeyed like he was 8 years old again, caught stealing coins from his mother's purse. I heard the door close behind him. Then I gathered the things. She didn't want to be buried where they told her. That's what none of them knew. Her ashes weren't meant for the marble plot he picked to show face. She'd left instructions, unofficial, handwritten, sealed into a velvet pouch and tucked behind a loose brick in the laundry room. I found it with my fingers, not my eyes. That's how old women work. We feel our way through the places memory hides. I took her out through the back. No one saw. Not the neighbors. Not the cameras he thought he'd installed. She and I made one last drive together, along the ridge where we used to pick wild persimmons and pretend we were the only women left in the world. I poured her into the soil beneath the cedar, where my husband's old compass still lay buried, rusting but unbent. She is with her own now. He tried to call again. 5 times between 9 and noon. Then he left a message, clipped and calculated. I think we should talk about the will. They thought there was only one copy. The one they forged and filed last year with a notary I once fed on Sunday afternoons. But my daughter knew better. She knew what legacy really meant. And the box, her last signal, was already waiting for me in a place he'd never think to look. He went back to the house later that day. I watched from the feed. He tore through the study, screamed into pillows, yanked drawers out of cabinets like the secrets might be hiding in the grain of the wood. But he never touched the floorboards. He forgot about the corner that creaked twice. He forgot that children once played there while he stomped his way through his second divorce. He forgot that she and I built that room together. It took 3 hours before he stopped moving. Just stood there, looking at the old wedding photo she never took down. His father, smiling like the devil in borrowed skin. My daughter, holding her hand over her belly, before she ever knew what that boy would become. I watched his knees buckle. But there was no one left to catch him. They thought they had time. Thought grief bought them weeks, maybe months, before the real vultures circled. But I had already opened the box. It was just a simple tin, faded green, rust hugging the corners, tucked under the warped floorboards of the garden shed she refused to tear down. You knew she left it there for me. It wasn't just for safekeeping, it was a map. She trusted the old ways. A note folded into quarters, a flash drive wrapped in wax paper, and a ring that hadn't seen daylight in 40 years. The same one I pawned once, to pay for her first apartment after she ran from him the first time. The signal came through the moment I touched the ring. One long pulse, then a low hum across the security grid. That was her mark. She'd buried it deep in the digital fabric of the house, triggered by weight and heat and light, her own digital breadcrumb. He never knew she was capable of that. He thought she just baked and crocheted and wrote letters with rosewater ink. He never noticed what was beneath the flowered stationery drawer. You knew what kind of man he'd grown into. The type who smiled at judges and snarled at waiters. The kind who shook hands with developers while gutting his mother's nonprofit under the table. He thought he was playing chess. But every piece on the board still answered to me. The will they filed was clean. Too clean. 3 witnesses, all distant cousins with shaky debts and shakier alibis. The language was cold, clipped. No mentions of the art, or the coins, or the small parcel in Patagonia my daughter inherited from my uncle's war bonds. Just the house, the cash, the family name. Left in full to him. Except she never signed it. Not really. You see, the signature matched, but it wasn't hers. Not the way she curved her D, not the pressure of her S. I could spot a forgery in a rainstorm, blindfolded, holding a flickering match. And this one didn't even pretend to tremble. She was dying. But this signature had hands that weren't shaking. So I handed the tin to the lawyer she thought I didn't know about. Eloise Mandrel. Black suit, red hair, teeth like razors, loyalty like stone. She owed me a favor that still burned hot from 1997. She opened the tin, read the original will, and her lips pressed into that thin line that only comes before war. This one, my daughter's true will, was dated 6 months earlier. Notarized in Montana. 2 witnesses with clean records and long paper trails. It left the house to the granddaughter. Not his daughter, the other one. The one from the girl he never claimed. The girl who sat by the bed while he was out at the bank, trying to liquidate what wasn't his. It left the assets in a family trust, controlled by me, until her daughters reached 30. It split the international holdings between the charities she helped build, and the girl he abandoned when she was 4. It even specified burial instructions. No marble. No men in suits. Just trees and something wild. That was her voice. It was real. They thought they'd buried her power with her bones. But her fire was always in her words, and she'd laid them out with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they'd try to steal. The fake will? Shredded before lunch. I kept a copy, of course. Evidence has a way of growing teeth when you need it to. But it never made it to court. Not yet. Because court was never my first battlefield. Shame is swifter. Family shame, the kind that breathes through walls and rattles dinner plates, can rot a legacy before the ink even dries. He came by that evening. Unannounced. No flowers. Just his usual sweat-slick charm and a file folder too thick for honesty. He tried to act confused. There seems to be a conflict, he said, as if the word conflict could hold everything he'd done. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. I think we should talk. I told him the truth with 3 words, I found it. His face dropped a fraction. That was all I needed. I didn't let him inside. We stood on the porch like strangers, the wind between us cold and smelling of rain. I handed him a small, clean envelope. No return address. Inside, a copy of the notarized will. And a note in my handwriting, read carefully. The future's watching. He didn't speak. Just turned and walked back to his car like it was suddenly too far away. That night, he filed a fraud claim with the court. Had the audacity to accuse me of fabrication. As if I hadn't built the foundation of that house with my own hands. As if I hadn't stitched secrets into every drawer, every hinge, every bloody floorboard. But that was the moment I knew he was truly lost, not to greed, but to fear. Because when a man thinks the world is his, and then the rug pulls out beneath him, he doesn't fall. He claws. He sinks. And this time, he would not rise. They thought I didn't notice. The way they moved through rooms I built, touching nothing, saying less, hiding more. They thought because I rocked slow in my corner chair, with a blanket over my knees and knitting in hand, that I wasn't watching. But the truth is, I never stopped watching. Not since 1982, when I found the bruise on my daughter's back and she said she fell in the kitchen. Not since 1994, when the first trust was mysteriously drained just as the hospital bills rolled in. Not since he was 12, and I found the locket in his sock drawer that belonged to my mother, missing since her funeral. You learn, over time, that love doesn't just protect. It records. So I started recording. First, a camera in the kitchen light fixture. Then 2, 3 more in the study vents. Audio under the piano, then beneath the dining table, the one they used to argue over like it was a throne. I kept hard drives in tin boxes, encrypted with names they'd forgotten, my cousins lost in the war, the dog we buried in the backyard. Every keystroke, every wire transfer, every conversation about repositioning assets, while my daughter was coughing blood into cotton napkins. The signal came through again the week before her death. A burst of motion at 3:06 a.m. in the pantry. Him, on the phone. Sweating. Mumbling phrases like offshore, liquidate fast, before she goes. I watched him open a safe I didn't know she had. Count bills. Close it. Stare at the wall like it was trying to punish him. They thought I was sentimental. That I'd tucked myself into nostalgia and forgotten how to fight. But surveillance is a form of love, and mine had sharp edges. Every camera was a witness. Every tape a future courtroom. You knew the moment was coming. The reckoning wasn't just financial, it was personal. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about memory. About what they tried to erase. About my daughter's life being reduced to assets and liabilities like she was never a woman who danced barefoot in the rain or wrote poetry on the backs of receipts. So I gathered the tapes. Copied them 3 times. 1 set for Eloise. 1 for the girl. 1 for the press. You should have seen him when the first one aired. Channel 6, Local Evening News, 6:45 p.m. A segment titled, Inheritance or Injustice? A Mother's Voice from Beyond. It was just audio. Nothing visual. But her voice, my daughter's voice, was crystal clear. Talking to a nurse. Saying she was afraid of him. Saying she'd changed her will. Asking if it could be sealed. The rest of the segment cut to archived footage of her charity work. Her standing in floodwater handing out blankets. Her laughing with burn victims. Her holding a child that wasn't hers, like it was. He tried to file a cease and desist. Claimed unauthorized surveillance. But the nurse came forward the next morning. Confirmed the recording. Confirmed the fear. Confirmed that my daughter died asking to speak to me, but he told them I was unavailable. They thought I'd be satisfied with one news story. But the hunger for justice only sharpens when it's fed. The second tape was worse. This one visual. Him, slapping a ledger shut while yelling at the girl. The other daughter. Telling her to go back to her mother's ghetto and stop sniffing around his house. He used slurs. He used her name like it was dirt. That tape went to the board of the family foundation. 3 hours later, they voted him off. The third was the nail. Audio only. 15 minutes of him coaching the notary cousin through a signature. Telling him how her hands were shaking. She won't even know. She's drugged to hell. Just hold the pen for her and I'll handle the rest. Clear as glass. Timed. Dated. The cousin fled the state the next day. And the forgery case opened in full. You knew then what I'd always known, the house of cards wasn't built on greed. It was built on rot. And when the wind came, the storm, there was no shelter left. They sent a mediator. A young man with cufflinks and a fresh haircut who spoke like he was allergic to eye contact. He said there might be room for compromise, that mistakes had been made, that perhaps we could all benefit from de-escalation. I told him we were long past perhaps. He asked what I wanted. I told him everything he thought was his. And he flinched. Because he knew I meant it. Because I already had it. Because I had kept everything. Because I had never stopped watching.